When did we start thinking about or discussing climate change on like a global systemic scale?
Yeah, I mean, it was well after the scientific community had started talking about it. If you go back and you look at what they were saying, the people who were working specifically on this topic back in the 1970s, they were very clear what was happening even back then. But yes, I think the conversation really took off in the late 1980s, which was before we could see a clear warming signal. So it was a prediction made by the climate models that they had available at the time, but it's a prediction which turned out to be pretty much correct. And so we've seen the warming that they predicted back in the 70s and 80s. We've seen that happen since then.
Humans are destroying the planet. Do you agree?
Humans are affecting the planet everywhere, and we're seeing that. A lot of that effect is very wasteful, so we don't need to be affecting the planet nearly as much as we are doing. That I do find frustrating. The language around climate change does worry me at times. In particular, the sort of around the Glasgow meeting, this is the last chance to save the planet. You can't say that too often.
Nah.
And you know, it's a problem that people, particularly young people, get the message that we need to panic about climate change. At one level, we need to do a lot. We need to do a lot fast. But it's not clear to me that panicking is the right solution.
Can we save ourselves?
Of course we can. One of the most important things that I've done in my career, in some ways is the simplest, is to make the very, very simple point that future warming depends on future emissions. We are not committed to any particular level of warming in the future. If we stopped emitting now, we would stop the warming.
Right, so there's no delay between what we do and how it affects the climate.
There are delays in the climate system, but they would not introduce significant levels of future warming if we managed to stop emissions now. There is inertia in the system, but the inertia is due to us. It's the fact that we have open power stations that we intend to continue running for 30 or 40 years. That introduces inertia in the global energy system, but it's not inertia in the climate system in that respect. If we were able to stop emissions today, we would stop the warming at pretty close to today's level.
When we have public discussions about climate issues today, often they turn very polarized, it gets very black and white. Do you think there's anything we can do to combat that?
Yes, I think one of the reasons why it gets polarized is because it's personalized very quickly. And people feel that they're being told to live in a certain way because of climate change, and people don't like being instructed to live in a certain way. And this frustrates me because I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's actually the way we will solve the climate problem. I like to remind people we didn't solve the ozone problem by rationing deodorant or by changing consumer attitudes to personal hygiene. We solved it by the companies that sold the products that were causing the problem fixing it. And that's what needs to happen in climate change. We need the fossil fuel industry to step up and stop dumping their waste products into the atmosphere. They've got alternatives available. They just don't have any incentive to use them.
The students, like the ones you were teaching just now before we started this conversation, what do they aspire to do? Do you have any conversations like that with your students?
Of course. I mean, they're doing this course because they want to make a difference in the world. And this is it's a great group because it's a very multidisciplinary group, the Environmental Change and Management course. They could come from different. Yeah. They come from all kinds of. We have philosophers, we have engineers by background, and so on. They're all mixed together in that class, which is great. It makes for a really effective and interesting program. But it's important for me to actually communicate this to school kids. In fact, that if you want to help save the planet, we need your quantitative skills, and we need school kids in particular to be sticking at the hard sciences, so that we get them working on the solutions in the future. One of the things I do notice, when I was going to school strikers, 80% of the people I was talking to were girls. When I go and give physics lectures, sadly still here in Britain, 80% of the people I'm talking to are men. That's a problem.
Yeah. What do you hope to see happen at COP this year?
Well, what I would hope to happen, and I cannot imagine this happening, but I would love. What would make the difference? What would be transformative at COP would be for somebody, one of the big politicians, to step up and explain what net zero actually has to mean to stop climate change. And that means 1 ton of carbon dioxide safely and permanently disposed of, injected back underground for every ton generated by continued fossil fuel use. If they want a durable net zero by 2050, this is what it has to mean. Unfortunately, I think lots of politicians are using the phrase net zero to mean almost anything. And they haven't yet acknowledged, whether they understand it or not, I don't know, but they're not prepared to acknowledge publicly what net zero really has to mean.
Could you explain, just so everybody knows what we're talking about, what is climate change?
So our planet is kept warm by greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. These are a tiny percentage of the air that interact with infrared radiation, that interact with the energy that the planet uses to get rid of the energy that it receives all the time from the sun back out into space. You have to have a balance between incoming energy from the sun in the long term and energy going back out into space. As we increase the greenhouse gas blanket in the atmosphere, we push upwards the level from which energy can escape to space. And because as you go up through the atmosphere it gets colder, we reduce the rate at which energy is escaping to space, because cold air can't lose energy as fast as hot air can. And because of all that, as we raise the loading of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, we introduce an imbalance, and the world has to warm up in response. Now, how much it warms up remains a matter of intense scientific debate, but crucially, we can already see it warming in response to past greenhouse gas emissions. We can see that the world has reached 1.2 degrees because of the emissions we've already made. And we know where that warming's come from, and so we can predict what's going to happen next if we carry on putting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere at the rate we're doing. Every ton of carbon dioxide we put into the atmosphere drives up global temperatures by about 0.5 trillionth of a degree of warming. So if you want to limit temperatures to a particular level, you've just got to stop dumping carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. That's it.
We're all going to COP. You're also going to COP. What do you plan to do there?
Well, the main thing we're doing is explaining to people, whenever we get a chance, but we are running a side event with the Bellona Foundation actually to do this, the concept of a carbon take-back obligation. This is a policy that actually places an obligation on the fossil fuel industry to start to dispose safely and permanently of the carbon dioxide generated by the products it sells. I firmly believe that without an obligation like this, we're not going to stop fossil fuels from causing global warming. We can't ban them. I would say it would be wrong to try and ban them, because that would be tantamount to telling future generations and the citizens of developing countries that they're not allowed to touch their fossil fuels. I think that's wrong, considering our own prosperity is built on fossil fuels. So we have to work out how to decarbonize fossil fuels by ensuring that a ton of carbon dioxide is safely and permanently disposed of, which right now means re-injected back underground, for every ton generated by continued fossil fuel use. We have to get there by 2050, and the best entity in the world to actually achieve this is the fossil fuel industry itself.
Do you think there's too much emphasis in the media, in the general conversations about climate, about what the individual can do to combat climate change?
Yes, I absolutely do, because I think it distracts people from the main question. And I don't know whether it's a conspiracy or just a mistake, but what we've done is, by making this problem about what the individual is doing, we are distracting people from what companies and governments should be doing. And whether the companies and the governments are perfectly happy for that situation because they just don't want people to know, I don't know. But that is where we're at.